I can't see the questions.
Oh, Dawn, can you? Yeah, thanks.
Can you see the question, Sarah?
Yeah, I can see them now. Thank you, Dawn. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get started today, we wanted to begin with a check-in on this Friday morning. And this is just a reflective check-in, so no need to type anything in the chat or unmute yourself. This is really just an internal, reflective, inward check-in. We have some questions on the screen, and feel free to just reflect on whichever speak to you the most. What can I celebrate this week? What did I learn from this week at the end of the week? What's something that brought me joy? How am I feeling this morning? What's a way that I can take care of myself this weekend? And not to think too much about next week, but maybe one goal for next week. So we'd like you to just take a moment to reflect before we get started today. Thank you for participating in that reflection with us. I'm going to turn it over to Joe now.
Hi, thanks, Sarah. Welcome everybody to the May meeting of the Children's Work Group Early Childhood Conference. We're very happy you were able to take some time today to join us in this very exciting conversation that we're going to have this morning. We have more than 60 people registered for today. And we're going to get started real soon. And I see about 35 people are on. Just a few quick announcements on the Children Cannot Wait campaign, which is we're going after the gubernatorial and the U.S. Senate candidates to ask them what are they going to do to support young children experiencing homelessness. We expect to have a Zoom meeting with the Democratic candidates, Josh Shapiro for governor. We have asked his opponent, Doug Mastriani, to also give us a time, but I haven't heard back from them. And we're also after the Fetterman, and once they figure out who won the Republican nomination, we'll go after them. So that's something to look forward to in the next couple of months. And with that, that's the only announcement I have for today. I want to hand it over to somebody who doesn't need an introduction, but Dawn Knock of the PEC Bell Project. Dawn, take it away.
Hi, good morning, everybody. If you guys could do me a quick and brief favor, just put in the chat where you're coming from. We know we have about 40 people on the call. We would just like to know what you do. Give us your name, give us a little shout out, because we want to make sure that you're included in this particular activity, which is very unique. So what are we doing today? We're going to engage you in what we're calling a fishbowl activity. And what's that, you might ask? Well, it's sort of implied in the name. Like a fishbowl, people on the outside will observe what's going on in the inside. So today we're going to engage staff from the housing industry right here in Philadelphia related to the work that they do. And you will listen in as they share what they do. You'll hear about their thoughts, about the families living in shelter, what their work environment is like, and how COVID has impacted their stay in shelter. We will also hear about childcare and what it's been like for children and families during this current pandemic. And then after that, you will join our official observers who you don't see on this screen right now, but they will be observing officially in the background. And then they will come on screen and share their questions related to 3 particular buckets. That's what I'm calling questions, right? So you will also have an opportunity to join in that bucket of questions as I introduce them by putting your responses either in the chat or in the Q&A. So the first bucket, just so that you'll have an opportunity to do what our observers are doing, we will have you share what you learned. That's the first bucket, telling us what did you learn from this time with our Fishbowl participants. The second bucket, what's a question or questions that you have that you want to ask of the Fishbowl participants? Have those questions all lined up. So when we get to that second bucket, you can ask those questions. The third bucket is clarity. What would you like to have clarified after we've done all this great discussion, What further clarity would you like? But this is also a time when the fish will get to talk, because they will get to ask questions of the observers. Okay, so are you ready? And so what you'll see right now on screen are just the Fishbowl participants. And then, like I said, later, we'll have joining us the actual observers. So let's start with introductions, all right? And excuse me, I am going to ask that we start our introductions with Beth McLean. And if you can tell us what you do, your role, and what organization you represent.
Yes, I'm Beth McLean, and I am from the Druding Center. We are a transitional housing program for young families in the, I would say Northern Liberties, Old Kensington, New Kensington neighborhood, not quite sure what they call it anymore. I am Director of Residential Services, so my staff are charged with working with the families while they're here in the residence. We have 30 units, so we're able to serve 30 families at a time. We also have 2 other service departments here at the agency. One is our community services, and they work with families who have moved out of homeless programs and are now living in the community. And then we also have a daycare center.
Thanks, Beth. And now can we hear from Darlene?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Darlene Morris. I'm an emergency housing provider under contract with OSH, the Office of Homeless Services. The name of my facility is Darlene Morris Loving Care Residential Systems, and we provide emergency housing and supportive services to families. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, can we hear from Sadie?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sadie Sprague-Law, and I'm the Education Coordinator with Families Forward Philadelphia. We're located in West Philadelphia. We have a family residence within our program, and then also support families in our community supportive housing program.
All right, so let's get started, okay? So I just have a brief and short question, the first question. Can you tell me or tell us something that makes you smile about what you do?
I can start with that. You know, a lot of times our families come in and they have various, issues. So I'm happy when I see a milestone being reached, or a child comes in, he's got all A's on his report card, or a family is being told that their housing application has been accepted, or that the family has received their housing, things like that when I see them achieve.
Thanks, Darlene.
I would agree. I think for us, what makes us smile the most is seeing our families move into permanent housing, that day where it's a lot of excitement, but some also trepidation. They've packed up, they're, loading up the pickup truck and they're headed on to their new home.
I have a similar answer. I think that what makes all of us smile here at Families Forward is just having a family that's so proud of what they've accomplished, and especially seeing just children that are proud of what they accomplished, whether it be hanging up a piece of artwork in one of our offices or just coming in and wanting to tell us about their day at school. And then in addition to that, just having other residents share resources. So if there's a new resident that comes in and is like, oh, this resident told me to talk to you about education services. Just them knowing and having agency and confidence over sharing those resources is really an amazing part of this job, and knowing that you actually help them enough to want to refer you to another resident.
Wow, thank you guys so much. Can you tell us if there is a barrier to your work that you wish others understood?
I wouldn't call it I don't know if I would use the term barrier, but well, maybe it is a barrier, a challenge sometimes. It's very difficult running a 24-hour operation. You're 3 shifts, it's constantly operational. It's not just the coming in and the checking in, but it's things that happen in the middle of the night. And, sometimes those things can get pretty complicated and complex. It's not as easy as some people may think it is, but I've been doing it for a long time, and we've there's no situation, there are very little situations that we haven't encountered in the time that I've been doing it. But those are some of the things when you're dealing with a situation 24 hours a day. Anything can happen in the middle of the night, and you have to be ready to meet those demands.
And I think, and I'm going to pick up on the word that Darlene used, challenge. I see 2 challenges. The first is trauma, understanding and working with and trying to help the families heal from trauma at the same time that there is community trauma ongoing around us. And I think that's always a challenge. And the other one is affordable housing, and just the lack of affordable housing. We could move people so much faster into permanent housing if there were more options that they could afford.
Yeah, kind of on a similar note, I think that the biggest challenge or barrier that we have is that, as we all know, poverty is a systemic issue. So when you're working with a family that feels like they can never catch a break, just trying to continue to provide that encouragement of, we will work together to get through this, and figure out a way to achieve your goals while you're with us. But I think that the biggest barrier is when families continue to feel defeated when they are working to try and end this cycle of poverty that they're in. And when that comes to the childcare system, I think a lot of the times our families are hourly workers, our parents are. So especially during COVID, the biggest barrier has been lack of teachers, classrooms shutting down due to COVID. Families who are head of households who are hourly workers, they don't have that same kind of flexibility that some of us may have, who have been able to work from home or do hybrid. So when a family has to call out of work for a week, it's not the same struggle as for someone who's working from home. So I think it's that constant defeat that our families face, trying to end that cycle of poverty that they're in.
Wow, thank you ladies for sharing. Can you share how you may feel that the pandemic has affected the housing culture at all? Darlene, you're muted.
Yeah, I was thinking in my mind where to start with that. I think that the pandemic has revealed a lot of the what do you want to call disparities in housing and how certain people are left out of things. I think it's really brought it to the forefront. That's the way I look at it. I mean, things we working with every day, but for it to really kind of like mush surface, on a national level where it's become a real discussion.
And I also saw the impact of the isolation. So, just from like out in the community, but also in the program. So in our program, as in many programs, building community is so important to supporting and helping our residents move on. And that building community really was impacted because a lot of the activities we had to stop doing them. We couldn't gather in groups. Just getting to know staff and us getting to know residents because everybody's masked up. And so those pieces, those interpersonal pieces that have been such an important part of our work, we lost some of those.
Yeah, I started during the pandemic, so in some way this is all I know, which is kind of a crazy way to start, but it's also been great, and I'm glad to be with Families Forward. But I think that the biggest challenge and something that's also a success is that a lot of our families are actually coming into the family residence at least, and they may already be picked up for housing. So the challenge is kind of shifted of how do we give the family resources for childcare, for employment, for benefits that they will be able to use if they're not with us in a week. So for us, that means building our alumni network, which has really been something that our leadership has focused on, and a great way for families to know that once you're out of Families Forward, it doesn't mean that you're out of this family and community. We're always here as a resource. And I think that that's just a great way to create real change, rather than having people that we're seeing come back to our residents 2 years later, 3 years later, because they didn't have that support after they left.
Great, wonderful, thank you. Now, we talked about the housing. I was speaking to the housing culture. Have you noticed any impact on the families directly? What the impact of the pandemic might have had?
Well, Sadie mentioned this as far as like a lot of families that we work with are hourly workers, and their ability to maintain their income over the last couple of years in order to obtain housing has, been severely impacted, on work, off work, closures, early on, a lot of our focus in our work with them changed to just focusing on daily concrete assistance, because if their work site closed and they didn't have access to income, how were they going to meet daily needs? So I think that whole income work piece, and now that we're moving, that's stabilizing a little bit. Now, I think the destabilizing factor is access to childcare that stays open, because every time a childcare classroom has to close down because of COVID, or a school is impacted by COVID, then that can impact their ability to be available for work.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, if asked to be a voice for one or more of your families, what would you say that they would like for us to know about their circumstances?
I can go first on this one. I think that a lot of our families would want people to know how resilient they are, but how exhausting these systems that they have to work within are, and that they are really trying, but that it's important that families can navigate these systems without us advocating for them, so that they don't continue to fall into this cycle of not having the resources that they need. It shouldn't take me being an education coordinator to assist a family to get into a child care center. They should be able to do that on their own. And that is really a challenge right now for a lot of families to do, especially in the pandemic where a lot of offices have gone virtual. So I think just having that direct pipeline and understanding that parents should be able to advocate for their kids. They shouldn't need us as well. They're the experts, not us. So I think that that's really important to know.
I think that sometimes I'm taking it from the front door, right? What I see and what I observe when I see them first coming in, I think that sometimes they feel a little guilty that maybe they've let their family down because they're in this circumstance. And so we try to assure them that, hey, anybody could be in this situation. You know, we try to give them a wider view. You know, you're not, you know, it's nothing you've done wrong. Things are hard for everybody. It's a touch and go situation. So I try to keep them connected that way, because sometimes they do feel a little guilty, and sometimes they express the guilt by being a little withdrawn. Some people may come in and feel like they have to put up a defensive, you know, attitude. And so once we reassure them that, hey, this is, you know, you're going to get through this, it's going to be okay. You know, that's basically what I observe. Sometimes they feel like they're responsible for failing their family.
They said it perfectly.
Okay. All right. So when it comes to getting families, one of the focuses for Bell is getting families with children birth to 5 enrolled into early care. And we know that, you know, you guys deal with all of the children, all age ranges, but specifically for children ages birth to 5, what has it been like for them? What barriers has it been like for families getting their children enrolled?
I'm going to go first because why it's on my mind. The main thing that I have been confronted with is that some of the families, some of them come in and their children are already enrolled in programs from the neighborhoods that they were residing in, the neighborhoods they come from. But some of them, it's difficult to convince them. Some of them is a trust issue. Not necessarily a barrier in terms of them actually doing the paperwork and getting enrolled, because they do have support for that and encouragement, but sometimes they just don't trust the child care center for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. You know, not that they've even really had a negative experience, you know. So that's something that I'm still trying to figure out what's happening, you know, psychologically, because I have encountered that. You know, trying to encourage a parent. Well, you know, you know, telling them about all the different various benefits of going into a quality early learning program. But some are reluctant, not all, but some are reluctant because of a trust issue. So I don't know if it has to do with something that happened in their past or what. But that's what I'm finding.
I agree with that. You'll hear, I don't want to enroll them until they can talk, so they can tell me what's happening in the classroom. I also think, you know, in the current pandemic, obviously finding openings, there are far less centers there than there were before the pandemic. So just finding places that have openings. I know in our daycare center too, you know, openings are at a premium too, because of the difficulty that everyone is having in hiring staff. So, you know, that really impacts it. And then, like Sadie had mentioned before, you know, a lot of the agencies that support that process, like ELRC, went virtual. And so getting a hold of people to do all of the paperwork or all the processes in order to enroll a child is a little bit more difficult too.
Yeah, I would say similarly, I think we struggle mostly with that 0 to 3 age of parents feeling comfortable to send their kids to school. 3 to 5 parents seem to be more okay with their child enrolling in a child care center. But then once again, finding one that they feel comfortable with spots available that is consistently open has just been such a struggle for families. So at some point, families feel like there's more consistency in just not working and just staying home with the child. If they just are unsure of what their schedule is going to be able to look like on any given week. So I think the pandemic has really made that clear and harder for families to feel confident in enrolling their child in childcare centers.
So we've heard a little bit about that they don't trust childcare programs, and there's a little difficulty sometimes with the ELRC. So what happens when you see with a child that is struggling developmentally? What do you do then?
I mean, for us, we're really lucky that our neighbor is Chop Care Bots, and they have a great early Head Start program. So we're able to use them as a referral. And then early intervention and Elwyn have been amazing as well throughout the entire pandemic as a resource. And generally when families come in, we just will like automatically do a referral to early intervention, just saying, have a conversation. This isn't a resource that you want ultimately, no pressure, but I think just letting families know that there are other people out there to support you is really great. So trying to have as many referrals as possible for organizations that are going to be consistent with families even through the pandemic.
Normally,
Go ahead,
yeah,
Darlene.
normally because, the people who work at most, our facility, they're observers, and, they have to document if they see something doesn't look right. And then after that point, we make the referral. But I like your idea that you just mentioned, in terms of having everybody sign up for it, having it be an option. That way nobody falls through the cracks, and no particular parent feels that their child is being, oh, you're talking about something's wrong with my child, So I think that was that's very good. I'm going to implement that strategy.
I think the other thing that we all do, and this is where like the play spaces and bright spaces are helpful, is making sure that families have access to books and toys, developmentally appropriate toys. I mean, a lot of them come to us where they've been couch surfing for so long, they don't have many items. So they come in here and, maybe they have their clothes and a few other personal things. But when it comes to toys and books for the kids that they can do up in their units just to encourage development, they don't have those. And so making sure that we have them available, and that we're, giving them out to them and talking about the importance of having those things, up in their units, and so that they can play with their kids.
Now, thinking about, and each of you might not be directly responsible for enrolling children or asking, or helping, or assisting families get connected to childcare, but if you were to speak about what your individual struggles are when it comes to getting parents enrolled, what would you say those struggles are?
I would say they have, when families come into these particular situations, they have a whole lot of things they have to deal with. They have to, get births, although that's information they have to get for the programs also, but they have to get a lot of documentation. And a lot of times we do assist with that, but they have to do this, that, and some of them may have to go to work. So it's them dealing with a whole lot of different things, but we just try to, emphasize the importance of taking things a step at a time, take a deep breath, take it a step at a time, and letting them know that it is important for them to get their children enrolled, because you don't want your child to miss out.
I agree with.
I hope I answered that.
Well, I agree with you, getting all the documentation so that they can enroll, but also so that they can apply for that subsidy is sometimes very difficult. And I know sometimes it's even as like trying to get the information you need from the employer so that you can document your hours, your schedule, and trying to work with everybody in this, like, not everybody's working in an office, and so you're doing it virtually, and or who you might talk to on one day is not who you talk to on the next day on the phone. And I think that just makes it the process stretch out sometimes.
Yeah, I would agree with what everyone said. The process seems streamlined, but in a lot of ways, it feels like it's different for every family that we're working with. So I would say the lack of documentation is a huge barrier for our families. Even if they submit a quote unquote completed application to a child care center or a subsidy for child care programs that is completed given someone who is experiencing homelessness, it's often sent back and saying something's missing. So when we're telling families this is enough, writing a letter with it and, signing our name on it, saying that this is a family in our care, and then they're getting different information, that causes a huge barrier, is that the lack of streamline in the process, I would say, and how much we are having to advocate for families and they're having trouble doing it on their own. So I think that that's a big barrier. Also, our families oftentimes lack consistent phone numbers or consistent emails. So having that communication between our families can be difficult, and we understand that. So finding ways to work around that. So if a family's phone gets cut off, how are we going to reach them? And kind of figuring that out up front so that it's not a barrier when there's 2 days left before your application is denied, I think is really important for families that are experiencing homelessness.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, ladies. So looking at the current pandemic and what you've observed that's going on with our families, right, living in shelter, has the pandemic changed any of your goals that you have, any of your priorities, any of your approaches than it was what you had pre-COVID?
Well, the distancing, we all had to adapt to the distancing, dealing with the families, the staff, dealing with one another and with the families. However, our goals have not, our goals have not changed. The goal is to help the family get through this process and to obtain, housing, to take advantage of whatever things are available for them to have housing security, And
I agree with that. The goal's the same. I just, how we're trying to accomplish it now and work through, the challenges that the pandemic has given us, whether it's like, staffing issues or staffing absences, and letting them know and having them get to know everybody so that they can go to anybody depending on who's there that day. I think the other challenge has been keeping the staff morale and energy going through all of this. Because, for them, like just sometimes getting to work that's a lot, depending on what's going on. The same thing, some of the, childcare issues or whatever they may also be faced with. So, also making sure we're focusing and supporting staff so that they have the energy to focus and support the families.
Yeah, I would agree with what everyone said. I don't think that the goal has changed. I think that the way that we try to accomplish the goal has changed. So making yourself present is going to mean not always walking over to our family residence, but sometimes just making those phone calls to check in or sending a text, just so that people know you're still around, even if you're not in the office on a certain day. And then I just think we've really just depended on our amazing RA staff, who's done a great job throughout the entire pandemic of being on the front line and helping us make those connections to residents, whether it be getting an email saying, hey, this family came in with 2 school-age children, so like, let's try and get them enrolled by tomorrow. And then just having me know that is just extremely helpful. So I think it's just put more of an emphasis on having the staff collaborate. and just work together to try and accomplish the goal of, having our families have the best experience possible while they're here and get the resources that they need.
So it's great to hear that the goals haven't changed, but you've had seemingly to be more creative or find a different approach. Could you give me, I know Sadie just gave a few, could either Beth or Darlene tell us a strategy that you guys have employed to engage the families now, with the COVID, the pandemic, you had to do it differently. Can you share a strategy you used?
Well, I think one, and I'm looking at one of the others, like what's something positive that came out of this? Well, I mean, our building we're an older building. We weren't wired for Wi-Fi. So in the very beginning of the pandemic, it became very clear that we were going to have to do more things, both between staff and residents, virtually. So we had to, the whole building got set up for Wi-Fi. We tried to shift activities and meetings via Zoom. And it was also positive for the clients because we had residents who were working from home and then could continue that because they had access to Wi-Fi here. But we've done family teams with Zoom. And one of the positive things about that shifting to that technology was that some of our families weren't making our family teams because they were working. And so Zoom then allowed us to schedule, like maybe during their lunch hour, which was something that we weren't able. It was like, if you weren't in the building, it was like, how are we going to meet with you? And so something that we could have used previously, the pandemic, made it possible. And now, we can offer that as a way of meeting with clients, whether it's because of the pandemic, it's because they're working, or just some other, reason that they may need to have that virtual environment.
I don't have much to add to that. It's pretty ditto. I don't have a whole lot to add to that.
Okay, well, great. So thinking about the pandemic and thinking about your staff, thinking about yourself, even your families, is there something that you learned and I've heard Beth just shared one. She learned that there was a resource available that they tapped into as a result of the pandemic. Is there something else that the pandemic has taught you or that it's taught your families?
I think it's taught all of us, staff, families, and myself personally, that, we are adaptable. We can make things, we can function through situations. We can make it happen. If you really want something to happen, then you'll find a way. And I think that we've all navigated and continue to navigate through the situation by meeting those challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I think that just learning to stay flexible, no one day is going to look the same. So just be ready to adapt to whatever is happening, and find solutions. I think that, like Beth said, before we would be like, oh, this family isn't here, so we can't meet. Now let's just jump on a phone call or jump on a Zoom. So I think it has created a lot more flexibility for our families in a way that I hope continues after the pandemic too.
And I think for me, the other thing is, and we're still working, to bring that back within our building, is the interconnectedness and the importance of community, which I think we took for granted before that. And when we lost some of the ways we created community here, we really felt it, and I think we appreciate that more, both inside and outside of work, or hopefully we appreciate that more.
Great. So before we get ready to bring on the observers, I have one more question, because you guys are an important part of what keeps our families motivated. And we're concerned about, how they're doing. But my question is for you. How are you doing? How are you holding up?
I mean, I'm feeling good, but I will admit I'm also a newbie, so maybe the burnout just hasn't hit yet. But I think that that is also because of the staff that I work with. I think that without the support, that really does change things, and I see how other people may struggle without having that. So I think that that makes this job easy and fun, and even on the worst days, we're always laughing. So I just feel like that really does help get you through.
I think that, well, first of all, it's day by day, like, because through this whole thing, especially in the beginning, like we would come in and thought we would know what one day was going to look like, and then it was totally different, and then the next day was totally different. But I think that some of the qualities or things that we try to bring to our work, like being patient and seeing positives in small goal accomplishment, we now have to apply that to ourselves. Like, before, I think, maybe in our own lives or whatever, it's like, oh, it's going to be this big thing, or I'm looking for the next big thing. And I need to have that now. And like, I think this is like sort of pushed me to slow down and say, okay, it's not going to happen. I'm still, it's trying to see when the end is going to come, but I have to be patient, and so the things that I always brought to my work, now I'm having to really bring to myself.
Well, I'm going to add to that regarding the flexibility. I'm the type of individual, I keep lists of what I have to do, right? First, it's what you got to do for that particular day. Then I adjusted it. I said, okay, if I can get these things accomplished during the week, then great. So I had to learn how to be flexible. And then the pandemic, of course, has taught me to just be real flexible. So that's, you just, like, as you said, you just take one day at a time. You take the situations as they come and just try to roll with it.
Wow. So ladies, I want to thank you for your sharing and for your candor and just for your openness. I'm sure that our observers have gained a lot, that they have some questions that they like to ask of you. And we're going to bring them on screen, and we're going to give them an opportunity to share with us what they've been observing and what questions they have. And while they're coming on screen, for those who joined us after our introductions and what we're doing. So after you've listened into the Fishbowl participants and what they've had to share, we had some in the background, some official observers who were listening in and taking notes. And the first bucket of questions, the first bucket that we're going to ask is, what did you learn? And so they're going to share what they learned from the sharing. But guess what? Those of you out there in Fishbowl land, you get to put a question and an answer and a response in the chat to this question as well. And Omari and Sarah will be fielding your questions and comments and your observations, okay? So before we get started, I want to start with introductions. And I want to call on Edie, and I'd like you to tell us what you do, what your role is, and the organization that you represent.
Hi, Edie Harrison. I am here representing Philadelphia Birth to 3 Early Intervention. And my role is kind of as a liaison for sites and families in supportive housing to get to early intervention, because all children birth to 3 are eligible, even if there are no developmental concerns, just to be involved and tracked. And there are many, many supports that can be provided in addition to support for developmental concerns.
Thank you, Edie. And next we'll have Kashmira introduce herself.
Hi guys, my name is Kashmira Harris. I am the Executive Director and owner of A Secure Future Academy LLC, located at 4500 Chestnut Street in West Philadelphia.
Thank you, Kashmira. And next we will call on JJ, Dr. JJ Catuli.
Hello, I'm JJ Catuli. I am a visiting scholar at PEC, and I am a senior research scientist at Nemours Children's Health, where I do a lot of work on understanding the processes of resilience for children and families who experience homelessness and other adversity.
Thank you. And next we'll have Omari.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Amari Baye. I'm the Bell Manager here at People's Emergency Center.
Thank you. And next we'll have Sarah.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sarah Vrabik. I'm the project manager for the Everyday Learning Play Spaces initiative at PEC, partnering with Playful Learning Landscapes Action Network and Eileen Henderson of My Baby's First Teacher. And we work with a number of different housing programs in the city to create spaces in the programs that encourage play and positive interactions between caregivers, parents, and children. So happy to be here.
And last but not least, we have Joe Willard. You want to
Hey everybody, Joe Willard, co-chair with Malkia Singleton of the Children's Work Group Early Childhood Conference and VP for Policy at People's Emergency Center.
Okay, so these were our official observers in the background. And as I shared, both Omari and Sarah will be fielding your questions. So feel free to write in your first response to our first bucket. Guys, what did you learn? What did you learn from today's sharing? Kashmira, then Edie.
Yeah, I learned that there is a huge disconnect as it relates to me as the owner and executive director when we are marketing. We don't really consider the homelessness of adults and children. I think we look to market to like people that we feel are situated and are not really experiencing hardship. And this just really opened my eyes to another demographic that I feel like could use some more attention to be paid to, if that makes any sense. And so I'm open and willing to doing that. But I observed that I'm not well versed in that area, and I know that I'm not the only one that really don't have that on our radar to support and help as a priority.
Thank you. Edie?
In listening, and I thank Bill for giving this opportunity. I've never done anything like a fishbowl, and it really is wonderful to kind of be able to converse and learn and share information. And what I heard kind of a theme running through it was just resources, and one, how difficult they are to come by in some cases, and then the unique ways that they get shared. As Sadie was saying, kind of residents talking to each other and sharing things. I know that's a common one of how they learn about early intervention, with one family kind of talking to another about their experience with it. And trying to think in my head about kind of how I can best support and offer resources, whether it's early intervention or another set of resources that we have, with being a support and not kind of getting in the way or requiring too much time, because early intervention really wants to kind of help make those connections without taking too much time out of your day, make it easier rather than harder to do.
JJ?
Yeah, and so I've got so for the audience, Dawn gave us worksheets with each of these kind of categories set up. And so like in this category, I've got multiple pages. And so I'll try to condense it down into themes because I think we've heard and learned a lot today. But one of the themes that really stood out for me is that it's so important to remember that we're talking about families in situations who are then interacting with systems, right? And systems means a lot of things, right? It's how things are happening within the shelter, right? That's one kind of system. How things are happening with respect to accessing early care, and are they open, and are there early childhood programs, are they open? And then not only that, but these families are the parents are interacting with jobs and employment, and that's a whole other set of systems. And then, there are multiple steps with some of these systems, like, dealing with ELRC, which is part of, which is another system you got to do to access the early childhood system. And all of that's going on. And the reality that these families and these parents and these caregivers are coming in with their own sets of resources, right? And their own strengths and assets. And that's different from family to family. And not only that, but they have all their own situations that they're in, which also vary from family to family. It's not, we can't brush, paint with such a wide brush when we're thinking about, okay, how do we help each family do that? And then on top of that, everything going on in these systems, like our panelists emphasized, changes day to day, especially during the pandemic. And like how you do that, sort of the importance of flexibility as all of those things change day to day and family to family. And it really underscores for me just how important and I don't know if difficult is the word, but sort of what goes on at the shelter level to really acknowledge all of that and be effective with all of those dynamics, all that changing going on. And I think we've seen that in multiple ways in the comments from the panelists today. So that's a learning that stood out for me.
Awesome. Is anybody else? Does anyone else have anything they wanted to share? Two participants raised their hand. Okay, so Edie, and then who else? And then Joe. And then Omari.
I have to lower my hand from before. That was my old hand.
Okay,
Sorry.
so let's go to Omari, Joe, and then Omari. I'm sorry.
Okay, Beth had mentioned something positive that came out, and that she had to rewire her program. Well, that was duplicated through most of the emergency and transitional housing programs. So she reminded me that there was a lot of some positive things that happened during COVID, which was the agencies serving families and children really needed to upgrade their systems. And because a lot of times, most of the emergency program and transitionals, we've had the same amount of money we've had 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and annual costs just don't get picked up by the usual contracts. But a shout out to Office of Homeless Services, Comcast, and a few other funding sources that stepped up and gave most of the shelters a new Wi-Fi system so that families and kids, and got a shout out to the School District of Philadelphia too, because they gave Chromebooks to almost every single kid in the shelters to adapt to this crazy change. And it's a shame that it took a pandemic to really help agencies be more family friendly and get them the things that they needed to do their activities of daily living and all. So that's what I wanted to add. Omari?
So what really sticks out for me is one, how much the shelter community does to support families experiencing homelessness. Appreciate, all of your hard work and sacrifice. I love hearing, Darlene and Beth and Sadie speak on just, and I guess Roz always puts it best, like the need for us to remain nimble, right? Because you never know what's going to happen You never know what stressors a family is coming in with, and you don't know what they're going to experience once they come into the building, right? There's consistently something happening. And I really appreciate Dawn's question regarding like self-care, and learning, and getting a better understanding of what you've put in place for yourself, to deal with just the overall uncertainty. So the thing that points, that all of this really points to is just the need for us to be understanding of not only what you're experiencing and the families are experiencing, but also like your bandwidth to handle all of the paperwork and the services and the red tape and everything else that comes with your position.
Wow. So I see no other hands raised for this particular question. Were there any questions in the Q&A for this?
We have quite a few questions in the Q&A, but
Okay. Oh, so I made that mistake. Observations about what they learned before I get to the questions. Were there any other observations shared about what they learned? Did you learn anything before I moved into the questions? All right. I think we're good on what we've learned. Now, part two, the second bucket. This is where we open it up to questions. And what questions do you have of the Fishbowl participants? So you know what? I see Edie's hand, and then I see Kashmira's hand, and let's start that way.
One question I have, and I want to thank Sadie for bringing up the idea of just doing kind of an across the board refer all children birth to 3 to early intervention, because we would love that. We'd rather get the referrals with families understanding they can say no at any time. Even if there are no developmental concerns, they can be referred. We can offer community resources, all kinds of things. My question is there anything that I can do to help make that easier? We do have a specialized referral form. Is everybody open to it? Darlene, I'm so happy that you're open to doing that. Anything I can do to help?
Okay. So it sounds like your referral form is a good starting place. I'll say that, Edie, because they don't have any questions relative to that. Sounds like they don't have an answer.
Okay, sorry, my computer froze.
So can Edie has a question.
Comment. I would just say that even with doing the referral forms, I know sometimes our families may not follow through after that. So I think having you come on campus was actually really beneficial for our families to just be able to have a conversation. And even families I know that had already done a referral form did it again after having that in-person conversation with you. So I think bringing that back was really great. And I know we're talking about doing it again. So thank you for coming out.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, our ideal is to come out once a month, and we bring books and resources, and we love talking to families and answering their questions. Or if there's a family who was involved with early intervention and lost connection, we can help remake that connection. So thank you, Sadie. Thank you for having us out there, and we are happy to go to all sites to do that.
Kashmira, and then Omari.
Yes. So the question that I have is, how can the relationship between the network of childcare facilities that I am involved with and the organizations that have shown up here at the Fishbowl, how can we collaborate to make sure that we can be a part of referrals and resources, so that we can offer our families and even our staff maybe sometimes to the services that you guys offer, and likewise how we can be a reference to some of the issues that you guys may have or families that you guys experience needing quality care.
Well, I don't think you're far from where I'm located, first of all. Oh, is it okay for me to? You're not far from where I'm located, so I'll be in touch with you so we can see how we can collaborate, and I can try to get convince some of those families that are not currently in programs to get into your program because it's closer to where we're located. So I'll be in touch.
Yeah, I would say same. I think it's about having that connection between us and the providers. Like I know when Bell came out last year, they had a provider come out and speak with families. So a lot of it, as we said, is that word of mouth. So anytime that we can have word of mouth be about a star 3 or star 4 program is, I think, beneficial to everyone in our family residence and community supportive housing. So I think just making that connection, having someone you can reach out to as a point of contact at a shelter or community supportive housing program is really great.
And I think it's good to know, what housing programs are in your area. And so as we make the connections to also remember, what are some of the life barriers in general our families are going through. I know one of the things that we deal with constantly, because of their trauma is that simple things can get frustrating. And so sometimes parent behavior can look a little extreme, like in outside resources. And by understanding trauma, being better able to put some of those behaviors into context and not just be, okay, this parent was this way, so now we're going to label them problematic and not deal with them. But understanding where that behavior is coming from, knowing that they're working through homelessness and trauma.
That's good. Omari, you have a question? And then JJ.
Yeah, so actually we had a few questions in the chat, but Roz asked two really important questions, and any of the directors can take this because the needs may be different from, for each program. But what, in your opinion, is the most promising resource that your families benefit from and that you rely on? Also, what materials or products are you in need of at your facility the most? What do you run out of or can't afford?
Immediately, what I think about, Omari, is the services that we receive from our case management team. We couldn't do this without them, in terms of the resources and the support that they provide, not only for the families, but also for my staff and myself. So we work collaboratively, as everybody else, does at their site, I'm sure, as a team. As far as what things additional things we may need, I'm going to have to get back to you on that. I can't think of it right now, but as far as the resource that's most important is case management. They're the key. They're the key.
And for materials and products, I would just reflect on, in light of right now, everybody's going through, the baby formula shortage. So as you hear about that in the larger community, reflect on how that is impacting families that are going through homelessness. And, if you're aware of a housing program in your community and you can make a connection to them and provide, that's always helpful. Because, I think some of the material shortages that we've experienced during the pandemic get further amplified when it's layered with homelessness. One of the things I think about daycare, a lot of, with daycare, you have to supply diapers and wipes. And, that additional cost onto what you're having at home sometimes can be overwhelming. And I know a lot of the housing programs do a great job of, getting donations so that they can assist families to bring those supplies to daycare. But sort of that's a level of understanding, that that needs to be out there. It's like, oh, why isn't the parent bringing in diapers? Well, oh, wait, they're homeless. Maybe they got cut off. They're without income. How can we support them?
Absolutely. And just for everyone, I know I said Roz, but who I'm referring to is Rosalind Edwards, our director of early childhood education here at People's Emergency Center.
JJ, and then Sarah.
Yeah, so I'm curious about something that came up. Beth mentioned that Druding has an on-site childcare facility, and Sadie mentioned having Carabots just down the street and their early Head Start and ECE programs. I'm wondering if you could speak more about the value of that, and if it's particularly valuable, what seems to be the key ingredient? Is it the physical proximity? Is it relationships that formed because you're so close? Is it something else? Kind of what's going on there? And tell us more about having an on-site or very close ECE partner.
I would say proximity is really important. I would say that the more parents in your program, because if they're close by that you use it, that word of mouth then becomes really valuable. Sadie had talked about, them sharing resources with each other. And if you have a parent of a young child that got really comfortable with that service, then they can say, hey, this is really good. And so that's why those relationships of services that are nearby, establishing those relationships can be so important for making those connections with families.
Yeah, I agree with the proximity aspect. Even with our closest pre-K program, there's one at the Haverford Center, and just having that relationship where they know what our families are dealing with, they understand that a large population of our families attend that center or attend CHOP Carabots, and have a person that they can connect with on our end as well is really helpful, I think. So I think just having very understanding staff at those programs has been great, and having them close by has just made it easier for us all to connect.
Great.
So we have quite a few questions from our audience members, and I want to make sure that they're represented. Karen Hudson put in our Q&A box, what processes or practices did you invoke because of the pandemic that you wish you had used pre-COVID?
Well, I'm just the whole virtual piece and the Zoom piece and being able to use it to connect with families has been a great learning tool, and a great way to be able to do some regular planning with families that we wouldn't have thought about previous to that.
I agree. It has made things more convenient for them, and so as we move further along, it'll help to move their processes along. The virtual piece is definitely helpful.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to a couple of others, if that's all right. June Waters Bay asked, what types of permanent housing are the families encouraged to seek?
Well, actually, the process that I'm involved with, once all their vital information has been gathered, the information is then sent to a clearinghouse, and the clearinghouse kind of determines what type of housing is suitable for a family. For example, if a family has a special need, a family member has special needs, then they may be geared towards permanent supportive housing. Some families are geared towards PHA housing, and so on and so forth.
And I would say that we don't encourage one type of housing over another. We really encourage families to sort of define what they're looking for out in the community and what community in Philadelphia they want to be in. Having said that, a lot of them are looking for subsidized housing, where they're not going to be paying full rent. Unfortunately, that comes and goes. One of the benefits coming out of the pandemic is that we do have access right now. HUD has made some subsidized programs available for homeless individuals and families, but that's not always there. So, sometimes it's like looking at fair market rental, and then what does that mean? If I want to pick and choose where I want to live and I'm going to go to fair market rental, then, supporting them to increase their income so that they can achieve that goal.
Thank you, everyone. There's another question that I think Edie can probably field. When referring to supportive services, does that include services for people with disabilities?
And I'm not sure what age range the question is for, but definitely for birth to 5, as far as supports. There's early intervention for birth to 3. There's Elwyn from 3 to 5. I'm not sure if the sites are aware of any other resources, but my home agency, this is kind of my side gig that I help Philadelphia County with. And I work for an agency called KenCrest, and they have supportive services through the lifetime, whether it's employment assistance with people with disabilities, housing. So I'm not sure if people are aware of that agency or others that do those supportive things. So I'm not sure if sites can answer that one, if they have those resources.
Was that the last question, Sarah?
We have one more question actually for Kashmira, which will be perfect because she has her hand up anyway. So Maureen Hayes has a question for Kashmira. She's asking, how can shelters and housing programs make ECE programs more aware of the families in shelter looking for ECE? And how can ECE programs market themselves to these families?
So I had personally reached out to her in her inbox, but what I had shared basically was that there are, as it relates to me, I've always wanted to be a part of those type of organizations. I just really didn't know where to start or where to begin. Even if I were to go to the Red Cross, Salvation Army, anything local, I really didn't know who to talk to or how to really begin to foster that relationship. And the biggest thing for me is making sure that I speak to the right person. The red tape can be, you can say, hey, reach out to this person, send them an email, but you never know if they're going to reach back out, how long it'll be. So that was really the biggest issue for me. Because I am part of a larger organization such as AFL, Action for Early Learning, there's a network of childcare workers that are located throughout the city, wherein if I'm connected to resources or if they're connected to resources, share that information with everyone. So I gave her my email address so that we can begin fostering relationships, and therefore I can take it back to my network and be able to share information with other providers so that we can begin to create the awareness or more awareness and foster a relationship or strengthen some that's already provided.
Perfect. And Kashmira, did you have a question that you wanted to ask?
I did. So in listening to the participants in the Fishbowl, I wanted to know in which ways did or do you guys provide training or tips on how the parents can advocate for themselves? Because I think that advocacy is important, and I heard that you guys do advocate for them, but what strategies do you guys have in place to teach them to advocate for themselves?
I think that number one for us is just making sure that the parents have all the information that we have. So making sure that we're not just doing the application, but after we submit an application for ELRC, which we do actually like physically bring in for them, we send them a copy of their receipt, a copy of all the information we submitted, their receipt number, how to reach ELRC with them and their case manager copied on it, so that they have as much information as we have about the process that they're dealing with, and have information about who to reach out to if they don't want to wait for us, because they shouldn't have to. So I think that's number one. And yeah, that's what we do.
And just building off that, I would also say that we're constantly modeling. So as case managers, we're not trying to make those phone calls in secret, or be the one that fills out, the application alone. It's like partnering with the families, having them right there. If they're having problems, figuring out how to talk to a resource, then, seeing if they want us to step in at that moment, letting their skills and their strengths shine, and then having them, bring us in as they need. So it's that partnership and not doing for.
So before we're almost running out of time. Our clarity question is, does anyone have a question that they want, clarity on a concept that was presented today, that you would like one of the panelists to speak to? This is a time when you can ask questions.
We actually have one in the Q&A, a clarity question from Rosalind Edwards. She's asking, and this was touched on early on in our workshop today, but what percentage would you estimate of the families feel guilt for being in the situation that they are in?
That is difficult to gauge. I'm the one who mentioned about the guilt. That's difficult to gauge. It's really difficult to gauge for me to estimate, I really can't say.
And Darlene, would you say half? Just if you would say a little more than half, a little less than half, if you could go and.
Okay, I'll say a little more than half, slightly more than half. Yeah. Because I'm thinking of various situations, different things that have happened, so it was difficult for me to say it right off the top of my head, but I'll round it out to a little bit more than half.
Okay, thanks. I saw Edie's hand, Kashmira, JJ.
I'm just looking at the Q&A, and Bernadette had a question about if there is a way case manager can check to see if a family is already connected with early intervention. I can answer that part. ELRC, I'm not sure, but if you reach out to me, I can definitely get that answer for you. And I can connect you to someone I'm going to find out who's a more direct route to that information than me. But for now, you can definitely reach out to me and we can find that out.
Kashmir, JJ, and then Kashmira.
Yeah, Kashmir, I'll just jump in here because my clarification question is also about sort of these multi-step processes like infant and toddler early intervention. And we heard about ideas around referrals and kind of normalizing the referral process and the value of Edie and her team coming out monthly, and that seems to be bearing some fruit. But there's a lot of steps past that too, right? And so that's the initial referral, and then there's assessment, and there's even setting up the assessment and then completing the assessment, which in and of itself can be a multi-step process. And then there's kind of feedback, and then there's engagement in services if if eligible or as eligible. And then there's tracking too. And so that's a lot of steps, right? And so, you know, I'm wondering, how's that going lately? And then kind of thinking of past the referral step, is there anything that we can do to think about, you know, supporting families to get by those other steps? And so this is one of those opportunities where we have both sides of on the shelter side and on the EI, infant toddler, at least that side of early intervention. So I'm wondering if we could clarify some more about that whole multi-step process.
Yep, and I'm happy to speak on that. I don't know if you want, and thank you very much, JJ, for the information, for reminding people that were there and being so supportive of that. The specialized referral form cuts out some steps. So we tried to make it as streamlined as possible because we know families, they're busy, they have a lot going on, they might move on quickly. So we want to make that connection quickly so that it can be maintained and it can follow them wherever they go. Even other states or other counties, early intervention is a federal program. Once a family is referred, they get connected to a service coordinator, and there are 2 kind of dedicated service coordinators for supportive housing, Natasha Green and Jasenia Whitaker. And that's kind of the point of contact. We know it's a confusing process. It can be, there are a lot of steps, but the service coordinator is really the parents' support, their main contact, to help them through all those steps and to understand what's coming next and to understand their rights to say yes or no to any part of it. So yes, it's referral, connection to the service coordinator, who will then help with all the steps after that, from evaluation to plan to services and supports. So I hope that answered that.
Yeah, and so from the other side, I'm wondering. Oh,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We got 5 minutes, and I saw 2
Oh, okay,
hands.
go ahead.
I saw Casimir. I'm so sorry, Casimir, and then Sarah.
Yep, the only quick question I had was that we're all dealing with the, I heard you guys talk a lot about building community and how community was very important. So the clarity that I'm looking for is, in which ways have you guys devised strategies to help build or rebuild community throughout the pandemic, or now that we're trying to continue to go through the pandemic?
We try to have like little, you know, small, carefully planned out activities. I'm starting to integrate that back into my program. When you say community, you're talking about the community in which they're living in, the shelter or emergency housing or transitional housing community. So we're trying to slowly introduce, you know, things, but also making sure that people are careful.
And I would say the same thing is we are starting to bring back small groups. So whereas we might have done a group or workshop and it would, you know, be 8 to 10 people, you know, now we're focusing on maybe 2 to 3. It allows them to get to know staff better. It also allows them to know each other better. We're also, we did a lot of and do a lot of family activities. And so really focusing, now that it's warm, on where can we be that's outside, that there's plenty of space. In another week, we're going to be doing an outside activity at Smith Playground. So looking at those kinds of ways to safely build back in, but evaluating every activity we're doing for space and safety and those kinds of things.
Yeah, it's been great for us to transition the monthly community meetings that we were doing in person before the pandemic to Zoom. And like Beth said, it's actually allowed an opportunity for families who were working or wouldn't always be able to come to those to actually join and still be a part of it. So I think doing that monthly has been great for us to just be able to show face, see participants, and have that discussion. And we're really grateful to have a great outdoor area also at Families Forward, where we've been able to continue to have activities and resource fairs and things like that outside when weather's permitting.
I just have a final clarifying question for Sadie, actually. You mentioned in the beginning that you all were kind of tapping into an alumni network. And I was wondering if you could say more about what that looks like, if that has helped to build community, and really just what that looks like for Families Forward.
Yeah, so our leadership team has really taken charge on creating an alumni network, especially during COVID. It's been great. I know last time that we had this conference, Antoine and Cecily came on to talk about our Family Residence Council, where we have alumni come and work on things that are happening in the community. Basically what happens is that when a family leaves, they can decide if they still want to be a part of the alumni network or not. So every time that we have a resource fair, our director of social services, Diana, calls every person that has agreed to be a part of our alumni network and asks them if they want to join as well. Anytime we go get food boxes, Diana is also making that call to see if families need food boxes. So I think it's about knowing that we're always here. It's really fun to have a family come back. Just last week, a family that I worked with very closely came back with her children, and just, you know, to see that they want to show you what they've been doing and how great they are, that's the best part of the job. And then I was just like, hey, you want to grab some stuff from the pantry? It's families that don't always ask, but, you know, just knowing that they can come and always have a space here in Families Forward is really important. And I think it's been a great way that senior leadership has shown the rest of the staff how they want Families Forward to be, and that's leading with hospitality.
Thank you. That's wonderful.
Right.
Thank you.
So I have one final clarifying question. Kashmira mentioned being a part of a larger network, AFL. Kashmira, can you tell us how being a part of AFL helped you make some modifications at your program on behalf of families experiencing homelessness?
Yes. So AFL has been a tremendous support of network and resources. But also that's how I met you, Dawn. And I was able to be open enough to be responsible and understanding that challenges happen, and at our center, we like to consider ourselves a family. And so I've gone as far as making sure that I receive donations from other families for gently used clothing, and we have it as backup. I'll even go out and purchase new clothing, and that could be undergarments, that can be socks, that could be diapers and wipes for families who are struggling. And we can have some at the center, and we can even send, a few home with the families. But I'm really big on making sure that we can support the families by giving back to them in the capacity in which they may need. And like I said, for the most part, clothing, Coach jackets, blankets, undergarments, like I said, gently used and or brand new. But AFL had opened my eyes up to that by meeting Dawn and just understanding that people have different needs. And if you can meet their needs, meet the needs.
So, okay, guys, I'm going to attempt to share my screen with you. I know that we're out of time, but these are two very brief, and I'm not sure if the PowerPoint is going to pull up or not and move as I would like for it to do. But if you could pull out your phone, we would very much like to get your input by going to this particular screen, www.menti.com. And once you're there, it's going to prompt you or ask you to answer the following question. And I will pull up, sorry guys, I will pull up the screen if it allows me to, but I'm gonna leave that there for just a moment, and we'll be able to see what pops up, what populates for the group. And I'm not, what I realized, it did say that I couldn't minimize.
Dawn, do you mind putting the code up again?
Or put it in the chat.
Can you see it? Is it
Okay.
showing?
No.
No.
Okay, let me close it out. See if it,
You stopped sharing.
okay. And I'm trying to get back to my Zoom. Screen share. Alrighty, hopefully it'll show now. It's just a second. Just a second. Can you see it now?
Mhm.
And I'm going to close this out so that I can actually go to the word cloud.
Yeah,
It's not working.
John, the code isn't working.
It's not working. Oh, well,
Um,
okay.
no.
Well, all right. What I am going to try and see is, yes, that's going to work, hopefully. I want to thank everybody who came out today. Pardon seeing my screen, but I have to do it this way. I want to thank everybody who shared, and especially the panelists and the observers who gave such thoughtful input, insight into what you do. And it is not lost on us. It is not lost on the group here, the work that you do. But just in case you needed to be reminded, I have a slide that I want to share with you guys. And oh no, how did it do that? All right, let's see if it'll play here. Can you see the screen?
You're the engine that makes all things go, and you're always in disguise, my hero. I see your light in the dark, smile on my face when we all know it's hard. There's no way to ever pay you back. Bless your heart, know I love you for that. Honest and selfless. I don't know if this helps it, but good job. You're doing a good job, a good job. You're doing a good job, don't get too down. The world needs you now. Know that you matter, yeah. You're doing a good job, a good job. You're doing a good job, don't get too down. The world needs you now. Know that you matter, yeah. 6 in the morning, as soon as you walk through that door, everyone needs you again. The world's out of order, it's not a sound when you're not around. All day on your feet, hard to keep that energy. I know when it feels like the end of the road, you don't let go, you just press forward. You're the engine that makes all things go. Always in disguise, my hero. I see the needs you now. The world needs you now. Know that you're loved.
Thank you so much to our first responders, our healthcare workers, our mothers. Thank you to our moms and our dads. Thank you to our teachers who helped us.
We know it's been hard, but thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good job.
So that's it. I want to say thank you guys. You're doing a good job. And unfortunately, I'm so sorry our word cloud didn't work. But if you want to chat, type in the chat a word that describes today, that would be appreciated. So thank you guys so much for attending. And thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to stop recording.